On a crisp October afternoon, Queen Anne's County farmer Hans Schmidt is getting up close and personal with his combine, cleaning and clearing from top to bottom to remove all traces of the soybeans he just harvested so that he can move on to more soybeans. But why go to all this trouble just to fill her up with more of the same?
We grow both GMO and non-GMO soybeans. We have to keep things separate through the whole season, from the time we plant the seed to the time those soybeans go to market.
GMO stands for genetically modified organism, which is an ominous-sounding mouthful.
That acronym standing for genetically modified organisms, I think people, when they see that, get a little scared.
Some consumers prefer to buy products labeled as non-GMO. But earning the non-GMO label means extra work for the farmer.
Making sure that your planters and your combines and your trucks are cleaned out. Making sure that the grain tanks that you store these soybeans in are all cleaned out.
Most of Hans's genetically modified beans end up in poultry feed, while his non-GMO beans go to tofu manufacturers for human consumption.
And we can get up to $2 a premium per bushel for those soybeans.
But most of the nation's soybeans, 94%, are genetically modified. On the surface, they look no different from their non-GMO relatives, but this humble bean is at the center of a heated debate.
What the general public is referring to when they say GMO is more or less genetically enhanced, where we're taking traits, i.e. genes, that are from any organism and delivering it in that crop plant.
Tom Clemente is a research scientist with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Center for Plant Science Innovation. If you ask him, genetically modified crops are just the next step in mankind's long march toward progress.
It's been going on for centuries. Humans have been selecting a soybean plant to look like this, the yield to look like this, the pod structure to come out so they don't shatter in the field.
But there's one key difference between traditional breeding and genetic engineering of plants.
A soybean breeder is restricted to all the traits within the soybean breeding population. With this technology, we could take a trait from any organism and deliver it into a crop plant.
To date, scientists have done things like insert bacterial DNA into corn to encourage pest resistance and give papayas a sort of built-in vaccine by adding a gene from a crop-killing virus. They also can turn off existing genes. In a GMO apple coming to the U.S. market in 2017, the enzyme responsible for browning has been silenced, meaning the apples look fresh for longer.
Now with this technology, the limitation is the innovations within the human mind.
So how does it work? Well, the most common method for making GMOs is called agrobacterium-mediated transformation. It uses bacteria to insert a new gene into the crop's existing genetic code.
It exploits a natural capacity of a bacterium called Agrobacterium tumefaciens to take a gene from its own cell and deliver it into a plant cell.
The process itself is actually pretty simple. Step 1, mix the new gene with the bacteria. Step 2,
mix the bacterium with our plant cells, and that does the delivery of that new trait into the crop for us.
In the conversation about genetic modification of food plants, the widely used herbicide Roundup comes up a lot. That's because some common GMO crops have been altered to become what's known as Roundup Ready.
You can use Roundup on a GMO crop and not affect the soybeans. But if you use Roundup over a non-GMO soybean, most likely you're going to kill that crop.
On a genetic level, the transformation from non-GMO to Roundup Ready is a small one.
If soybean has 54,000 genes, it roughly has 54,000 proteins. The Roundup Ready technology is 54,001.
But that single protein adds a new trait to the plant. In this case, resistance to the herbicide Roundup. That means Roundup can be sprayed on farm fields to kill weeds without harming the crop itself. And because that trait makes things like corn and soybeans easier for farmers to grow, it's considered an input trait.
The traits are broken up in two broad classes: input traits, output traits. Input traits benefit the farmer, output traits benefit the consumer.
These days, much of the lab's research has to do with output traits. The soybeans in this test plot, for example, are much higher in omega-3 fatty acids than a standard soybean.
and we're using this material to test for displacement of fish oil for aquaculture feeds, for a more cost-effective, sustainable production for aquaculture.
But whether modified for the sake of the farmer or the consumer, there aren't many genetically modified food crops grown commercially in the U.S. As of 2015, 10. For some farmers, deciding whether or not to grow them often comes down to one thing.
As a farmer, when I look at whether I'm going to grow GMO or non-GMO or even organic, to me, it's market-driven.
But the market is fickle, and the public GMO debate is a constant back and forth over consumer safety concerns, environmental impact, and the expanding food needs of a growing global population. One problem both sides can agree on is the need for education, especially since the lack of understanding is something food manufacturers often take advantage of.
You may get a product that says this bread is, made from wheat that's non-GMO. Well, there isn't any GMO wheat out there.
The surest way to avoid being duped: do your homework and decide for yourself.